Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
what you will see is a change in the culture.
Illinois' criminal justice system will undergo major changes the next few years, and it starts this Thursday.
But did we think about Anjanetta Young when this was going on?
We talk with alderpeople about weekend violence and the two contentious city council meetings last week.
This new dangerous variant continues to emerge.
What the super spreader Delta variant of the coronavirus means for the future of reopening, masking, and travel.
Investment groups bet on future demand for senior housing. That and more from Cranes.
Community organizations and state lawmakers are working to address so-called period poverty. We take a look at the issue in our Firsthand Living in Poverty series.
A new photo exhibit documents the past and celebrates the future of women in blues.
She said, yeah, we should try to think about how we can tap into this bizarre interest in you.
And as we get set for Phil Ponce's last regular Chicago Tonight appearance tomorrow, he moves to special assignment status, of course. A look at a memorable 2005 conversation he had with then Senator Barack Obama. But first, some of today's top stories. Chicago police say gang conflicts and retaliations are the likely causes of two mass shootings over the weekend, each leaving one person dead and injuring more than a dozen people altogether. Mayor Lori Lightfoot today called the violence frustrating and heartbreaking, claiming those who pull the trigger in retaliatory attacks have no decency.
They don't want to let the criminal justice system play itself out. They want to engage in street justice, which is tragic and terrible because invariably what happens, like as we've seen happen so many times with way too many children in our city across this year, when they aim, they don't get the target, they get the children and the innocent bystanders who have a right to live in our city without fear of being felled by gun violence.
And coming up, Paris has more from alderpeople on the city's anti-violence strategy. And for more on the investigations into these shootings from Police Superintendent David Brown, please visit our website. And the Chicago police officer who fatally shot 22-year-old Anthony Alvarez in late March has just now been stripped of his police powers. The Civilian Office of Police Accountability, which investigates police misconduct, made the recommendation 2 months ago while the investigation continued. Video of the shooting shows Officer Evan Solano chasing Alvarez on foot through an alley in Portage Park. Solano orders Alvarez to drop his gun before shooting him in the back. Police Superintendent David Brown wouldn't clarify why he waited so long to take the officer's gun and badge, only that he'd asked Cova for more information before making the decision. And to find out more of what Mayor Lori Lightfoot has said of this incident, please visit our website. And a Central Illinois summer camp for youth turned into a super spreader with 85 teens and adults infected with the coronavirus. The Illinois Department of Public Health says while campers and staff were eligible for the vaccine, only a handful had received it, and the camp didn't check vaccination status or require masking indoors. IDPH says a couple of people from the camp also attended a nearby conference, resulting in 11 of the cases, 70% of whom were unvaccinated. And now to Paris and a group of city council members. Paris.
Brandis, 6 were killed and 74 others wounded in weekend shootings in Chicago. That's partially the result of 2 mass shootings on the South Side that Police Superintendent David Brown attributed to likely gang ties. The summer violence is one of many issues facing the mayor and city council members, fresh off a vote to rename Lakeshore Drive Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Lakeshore Drive. And joining us now are Alderperson Michelle Smith of the 43rd Ward on the north side, Alderperson Andre Vasquez representing the 40th Ward on the north side, Alderperson James Kappelman with the 46th Ward on the north side, and Alderperson Jeanette Taylor, who represents the 20th Ward on the south side. Before we get started here, let's hear from Mayor Lightfoot, who addressed the weekend violence earlier today. Take a look.
We still have too many murderers that are not being held accountable, not just in Chicago, but across this country. But our county is being plagued. So I'm calling upon our county partners, and particularly those in the criminal courts. Open up the courts. People need to get their day in court. Justice delayed is justice denied. And you're hurting not only those who are charged, but also those in the community, the victims, the survivors, and the witnesses who need to have a measure of justice.
Alderperson Taylor, you hear Mayor Lightfoot there calling out the criminal court system, saying that that's possibly a part of why violence is spiking this summer. Do you see it that way?
No, of course not. Think about this. You live in one of the richest cities in the world and the minimum wage is $15. But we spend 40% of the city's budget on police and we don't feel any safer in our communities. This is because we disinvest in communities. We close schools. We don't have mental health clinics. Where are the services? And thinking about us being in a global pandemic for a year and a half, where are the services for the people? And so think about this. A cat will love you, but if you back it in the corner, what happens? It'll come out scratching. And it's no different than what's going on in our communities.
And Alderman Vasquez, we have the 4th of July long weekend coming up, traditionally a tough weekend for violence in the city. What type of strategy do you want to hear from the Chicago Police Department? And do residents need to hear from the mayor and from you all?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about more policing or strictly just like the Cook County court system, I think it's putting Band-Aids over bullet wounds. I think if you want to talk about fixing an issue, you address the root cause. And it's the same kind of thinking that imposes a liquor curfew or other things that aren't going to actually solve the problem, but it sounds good to say to the public. If you really want to solve the issue, you invest in communities, you have police accountability to actually increase some kind of trust between communities of color and those that serve and protect them, because then you would have the kind of information that would lead to better investigations to solve some of the issues that happen. But without that, everything else is just window dressing and it doesn't get it done. And
speaking of police, Alderman Kappelman, the police department has long talked about canceling days off. I think they're still in that mode. Overtime, mandatory overtime. The FOP has talked about a lack of morale, people leaving the force in droves. Are you worried about all this overtime and the police strategy that's being put forward?
Well, this whole situation of this violence happening in a police response, I mean, I certainly understand the need for a police response, but I agree with Alderwoman Taylor. A police response is just, it's not going to end it. We need more investments in these communities that have just felt left out for too long. And I want to see more violence interrupters in the city. And I think they too would be a huge help with our law enforcement and with the community to address the needs of these people who are finding that there's no other solution for themselves except to turn to violence. They're very angry and they have every right to be.
And to be fair, Mayor Lightfoot has talked about a whole of government approach, which includes violence interrupters and other city services. Alderwoman Smith, this comes as City Council has sort of stalled in its debate over civilian oversight, a plan that would give a new civilian panel eventually the power to hire and fire the superintendent appears to be going nowhere at this point. Is there a consensus plan that might emerge among you and your colleagues?
Well, I think there is a path forward, but let me say as to the first issue, which is that there's been an outbreak of increased violence across the United States. And I completely agree with my colleagues. This city needs to address the issues of historic disinvestment in communities, many communities in our city. But today, that is of little solace to the victims of these crimes. These crimes are being committed by people who now are using extended magazines. That's the reason we're having mass killings, is that now the firepower is going up and extended magazines are still legal in Illinois. And gun violence, having a gun in your hand, is not much of a crime in Chicago right now.
You're talking about
so I completely agree that we need to do this, but we need to have some strict enforcement of the laws that are on the books to send a signal to people who are committing violence now against their neighbors.
Alderwoman Smith, as a former U.S. attorney,
attorney
in the U.S. Attorney's Office, do you think that this newly announced federal help in the way of strike forces will assist the city in any capacity?
Well, I think so. I think the city needs the assistance. You know, just recently, a very difficult carjacking case was brought in federal court, a case that could have been brought in state court, but it was brought in federal court because I believe that law enforcement has more confidence that justice is going to be done for the victims of these crimes. And I think that we need to do more to work with our state's attorney, our U.S. attorney and our police working together to make sure that people who are killing people in our community, innocent bystanders, are given some justice, and that the message can be sent that it is not acceptable to kill your neighbors and kill your friends and kill each other under any circumstances.
Alderwoman Taylor, let's talk about the Civilian Oversight Panel. As I posed the question before, is it going anywhere? Is there any consensus that could emerge about civilian police oversight?
No, we're at a roadblock. We got a coworker who is stopping us from just having a hearing. And so, no, this is something that the mayor does not want. And so when the mayor doesn't want something,
about
it doesn't move.
Alderman Chris Taliaferro, the chair of the Public Safety Committee? Is that who
Of course. Oh, I was going to say it. I wasn't going to stutter. He definitely is stopping us from at least having the conversation, which is the problem in the entire city. We can't even have the conversation. And so when you can't have the conversation, you're not sure what the community wants. What we've done with the police hasn't worked over years. And so community control over the police is the same with the elected school board. You can't say what worked when you won't even try it.
Alderman Vasquez, do you see any consensus proposal emerging from this debate that's been going on a long time about civilian oversight of the police department?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a consensus legislation. It's called Empowering Communities for Public Safety. We've been working on it with the communities. It's got support from the Black, Latino, Progressive, and Socialist caucuses. So that is the consensus. The challenge is that when you have a mayor who does not want to move it forward, and to be completely frank, with respect to my colleagues, people who have never had the experience of being racially profiled or having to go through that experience, and then they're somewhat being the gatekeepers of our democracy, I think that's a problem. So for me, the Public Safety Committee is one of the most conservative in the city. We need to just bring it to the council floor and have city council members vote on whether they believe in police accountability or don't.
Alderman Kappelman, go ahead, Alderman.
I was going to say, Alderman Vasquez is a good friend of mine, and we can always talk. And I think that this is a historic opportunity right now to try to sit down in meetings, not necessarily on the floor, not necessarily, under a harsh spotlight, and try to work things out. I have been a very strong supporter of the GAPA plan and was prepared to vote on it. I wish we had voted on it. To that extent, I agree that we should.
And that GAPA is the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability.
Yes, right. And I was a very, very strong supporter of it. And I really did not agree that vote was delayed. So I think that this is a chance for other members of City Council to get more involved in these negotiations and see if we cannot come to a conclusion that can pass, and that can pass.
I absolutely appreciate that. I think that legislation could have passed had the mayor not walked away from the table and then had none of us talk about police accountability for 4 to 5 months, only to introduce a watered down copy paste version of that exact same bill. All right, so I agree. I think we could have talked it through, but the mayor stopped it.
We're going to have to delay the rest of this panel because we are out of time for now, but we will be joined again by the older people to discuss last week's raucous city council meetings and the name change for Lakeshore Drive. But for now, our thanks to older people Michelle Smith, James Kappelman, Jeanette Taylor, and Andre Vasquez. Changes are coming to Illinois' criminal justice system on account of a new law passed about 6 months ago in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Those changes will start to take effect in the next few days. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda, what does this new law do?
Well, Paris, this is a behemoth of a bill, and it touches on everything from how pregnant prisoners are treated to creating a statewide standard for what constitutes use of force. Now, a lot of the focus has been on one central component that kicks in down the road, the elimination of cash bail.
Most folks, when they think about the Safety Act, all they think about is the end of cash bail. And that is just one segment of the overall plan.
That's State Senator L.G. Sims of Chicago, and he was a key negotiator of this plan. He says the time frame is purposely stretched out so that courts, states attorneys, and police can have time to get systems in place. But other provisions of the law do take effect starting July 1st. 18 provisions, actually, according to the director of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. The association today actually held a 4-hour training to begin to get police up to speed on those changes. We're going to do our best to distill those into the next 4 minutes. Among the changes, police must begin to permanently keep records of officer misconduct. Sims cites as an example the Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, convicted of killing George Floyd, is an example of why it's necessary.
Who was an officer who had instance after instance of negative interaction with the community. If you have an officer who is engaged in that kind of repeated behavior, and their misconduct records are scrubbed after a couple of years, there's no record that the individual's conduct.
Now, the new law does establish a method for decertifying police where those patterns and that paperwork could come into play. Among the other changes that take effect come Thursday, police will have to collect and to report when they use of force that results in somebody dying or being injured, and also when they intervene in a mental health crisis situation when they're dispatched for one. Law enforcement also has to have a state-required legal duty to intervene. And Director of the Association of Chiefs of Police, Ed Wojcicki, explains what that means.
Which means if they see an officer doing something that everyone would understand is something that an officer should not be doing, then now officers have a legal obligation to intervene and put a stop to that. That was prompted obviously by the George Floyd case, but other stories that have emerged.
Additionally, now a requirement for police to render first aid when it is necessary. Now, again, much of this has been on track since January, February, but other elements of this just got changed on Friday when Governor J.B. Pritzker signed into law what's known as a trailer bill that makes corrections or clarifications. Senator Sims says getting that done was making good on a promise, and Wojcicki agrees. He says a lot of the narrative has been police versus the legislature, law enforcement versus the Black Caucus.
So much of what ends up in the public discourse makes it look like us against them, the police against the legislators, the police against the Black Caucus, and so on. I want everybody to know that the leaders of the Black Caucus in both the House and the Senate worked with us for dozens, probably hundreds of hours.
And that, he says, has resulted in changes. All those negotiations, for example, the original law forbid police from tasing someone in the back. That trailer bill changes it. It'll no longer be the case.
Let's look at it from a common sense standpoint. We don't want people shooting somebody in the head with a taser. We don't want them shooting them in the heart. So we want to disable that person. So let's shoot at a big mass like the back in order to take care of it. And when we pointed out that was the recommendation of the manufacturer, they said, yeah, that makes good sense. So they changed it.
Senator Sims says those changes, be it those that are taking effect soon or those like cash bail that are coming in a few years, will make a material impact. He says for too long, Illinois legislated around the margins on policing issues. He says the goal here was to take tough issues head on.
Change takes time, and you may not see the immediate, you might feel the immediate impact on day one. What you will see is a change in the culture.
That said, there are those who are not on board with all of this. For example, while defenders say that the trailer bill just made fixes and not substantive changes, there are some members of the Black Caucus who voted against it. Also, vocal advocates still want police completely defunded. And while members of law enforcement say that these recent changes signed on Friday do help, they are still worried about what is on the horizon. Wojcicki in particular, watching for a report that is due in the fall that analyzes the impact of eliminating qualified immunity for police.
For us, that would be almost a non-starter because qualified immunity is just such an important legal tool that police officers have. We think that it's really misunderstood.
Now, this isn't the only new law that takes effect on Thursday, July 1st, also the start of the state's fiscal year. So that is when the new state budget will also take effect. Paris, back to you.
All right, Amanda, a lot to digest. Thank you so much. And now to Brandis for a look at concerns regarding a variant of COVID-19. Brandis.
In Paris, as COVID-19 variants continue to spread, other countries are starting to reinstate masking mandates and lockdowns. Here's what President Joe Biden said about the one variant the World Health Organization is particularly concerned about.
This new dangerous variant continues to emerge. It's now the most common variant in America and here. And unvaccinated people are incredibly vulnerable. This is a serious concern with what experts call the Delta variant.
And here now to help us understand the Delta variant is Dr. Emily Lawndale, Executive Medical Director for Infection Prevention and Control at UChicago Medicine. Welcome back, Dr. Lawndale. So we know that this Delta variant exploding globally. Is it just infecting people who are unvaccinated, or is it breaking through the vaccine?
Well, anyone who's been vaccinated could still get a mild case of COVID with wild type, alpha variant, Delta variant, doesn't matter. About 5% of the time people are catching COVID. When it comes to the Delta variant, even vaccinated individuals, maybe up to 12% of the time might get a mild case. But the good news is that the vaccine is preventing most of those cases, and it is certainly keeping those people out of the hospital.
So as COVID-19 mutates, how does that impact infection rates and hospitalizations?
Well, it's certainly going, this particular variant is pretty nasty. It's extremely contagious, and the jury is still a bit out as to whether or not it causes more severe disease in younger people. That said, it is able to sort of spread through unvaccinated communities much, much better than the old coronavirus was spreading. And so these things that people, if you're unvaccinated, the things that you were doing before to help protect you from COVID are not going to probably be enough. You need to take additional precautions. Masking all the time, staying out of crowds, staying home. And if you're not doing that, then it looks like you're going to find yourself getting COVID, and you might end up hospitalized, but a large proportion of individuals end up with long-term symptoms and long COVID. So there are a lot of concerns out there if you do catch this variant.
Now, the Delta COVID-19 variant's symptoms, they differ slightly from the original virus. The symptoms include stomach pain, loss of appetite, nausea and vomiting, joint pain, and hearing loss. Dr. Lawndale, why so different?
Well, these are symptoms that we actually saw in a minority of cases of COVID from the very beginning. And in fact, the younger individuals are more likely to have these unusual symptoms or less common symptoms. The GI tract, sort of nausea, vomiting stuff, and diarrhea has been with us all along. And then the hearing loss, actually kind of similar to the loss of taste and smell. They're very sensitive nerve cells, and we know that COVID has a way of dealing with that. So this is not terribly surprising to me. And since younger people are actually getting this variant, because most older people and most people at high risk have already been vaccinated. So the only people available to Delta variant to spread around are younger people. It's not surprising that we're seeing sort of some more broad presentation of symptoms. And so you really have to think any sort of illness that you might come down with, you need to get tested for COVID if you're unvaccinated.
Now, we know that Israel has reinstated the mask requirement there. The United Kingdom is under lockdown again. Could either of these be reinstated back in the United States?
Well, I think in the United States, it is not very popular to have lockdowns, and they are very damaging for the economy. Now, that said, I think masking in indoor spaces is something that we may need to go back to in the future. I think anyone who throws out all of their masks at this point is being overly optimistic. Certainly, the World Health Organization came out with a recommendation this weekend saying that individuals who are fully vaccinated may need to wear masks indoors in order to help keep the spread of Delta virus in the Delta variant in check, especially because vaccines don't seem to work quite as well. Although I really think the main issue are the unvaccinated individuals.
Now, the variant itself has already mutated into a new strain called Delta Plus. Will vaccine booster shots be able to keep up with these mutations?
Well, it depends on how many people get vaccinated. So the faster we get vaccinated, the fewer people are going to have COVID, the less mutations we're going to see. And that's not just for us in the United States. It's everywhere. We really need to get vaccines out to every single country. We need to step it up and treat it the same way that we treated it in the beginning of the vaccine rollout here in the United States. And there are still a lot of Americans who have skipped their second dose. That first dose is not going to be enough to protect you from this variant. You really need both doses. And if you haven't been vaccinated yet, the current plans, are basically for you to either get COVID or get the vaccine. I would choose the vaccine. And I think the faster we can all adopt that, then the less likely we are to need too many new versions of the vaccine to combat lots and lots of variants.
And as COVID-19 mutates, the mutations mutate, what does that mean for people who are immunocompromised?
Yeah, so I've been very upfront about the fact that I'm immunocompromised like many other people. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm sort of in a middle category of a level of sort of immunocompromised status. You really need to talk to your doctor. There is data coming in fast and furious that has more and more details about who's really not responding to the shot, who's responding pretty well, and what sorts of precautions that you need to take. So definitely reach out to your doctor, whoever's managing your immunosuppressed condition, and make sure you get good advice about how to proceed based on the newest data, and keep checking back.
A lot to keep in mind. As always, Dr. Emily Landon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, a visit to a photo exhibit that honors women blues legends across the country. Stay with us.
There we go. There's much more ahead on the program, including city council members on last week's raucous city council meeting and Phil Ponce's 2005 conversation with Barack Obama. But first, as murals and music festivals continue to honor a music genre that calls Chicago home, a traveling photo exhibit is making sure certain artists receive their recognition as well. Arts correspondent Angel Ito shares how one photographer is using snapshots of time to pay tribute to the women of the blues.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's what Lynn Orman Weiss's traveling photo exhibition, Women of the Blues, is on the road to share. How female artists have contributed to one of the most influential music genres.
Chicago is, I would like to say, sort of the portal. It's a significant city for women of the blues.
This collection of historic snapshots is 6 years in the making and features more than 100 women, including Coco Taylor.
Coco Taylor, being our Chicago queen of the blues, played such a significant role in influencing and empowering the voices of the next generation of women. And she was my inspiration for this show.
The blues is what she loved. The blues is what she lived, but not how she lived.
Taylor's daughter, Joyce, agrees and says her mother, who grew up in the church and started as a gospel singer, remained true to herself and her faith while working with blues legend Willie Dixon.
Tonight we need no rest. Even in the making of Wang Dang Doodle for her, she refused to sing it because it was a lot about like the Dirty Dozen. And my mother said, I just can't sing that song. And Dixon said, you just don't understand. And she said, well, some of them words you got to change because I just can't sing that.
Also featured is up-and-coming artist Melody Angel, who says learning this history is imperative to her development as an artist.
Not only are you honoring the genre, but you're honoring the people who created it. Because for me, learning about my history, learning about music history, built me up in such a way. My self-esteem was built up by knowing that I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived and they invented and created things that we all love today.
You were a little girl when, really.
Yeah, you were little, honey.
Good to see you, boo.
From Chicago to St. Louis to Memphis, this exhibit not only celebrates artists who've laid the foundation for the genre, but also the photographers who have documented these musical celebrations across the country for decades.
We're usually in the pit right now, starting today at Blues Fest, elbow to elbow, camera to camera, lenses to lenses, shooting these remarkable women. So I wanted to give a voice also to the photographers because I'm one of them, and everybody captures the essence of the performer differently. And it's really, it becomes this beautiful narrative on who they are.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Incredible performers, incredible pictures there, and visit our website for more information on how to see Women of the Blues. The exhibit just finished its run at Delmark Records Gallery and has a few stops before heading to Bronzeville this fall. And there you'll also find out more information about the featured blues artists and the photographers behind their pictures. And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Yeah, Paris, thank you. That's very, it's always interesting to see that history, especially like women in blues. It's not something that you might hear as much about, but we know that they played a significant role. Still to come on Chicago Tonight. City officials hope to turn vacant land in North Lawndale into new opportunities. That and more from Cranes. We continue our conversation with alderpeople and hear more about the two contentious city council meetings last week. Illinois' General Assembly passed a handful of bills to address period poverty. We take a look at the issue in our Firsthand Living in Poverty series.
I have no plans and intentions of running for higher office in 2008.
Ha! And ahead of Phil Ponce's last regular appearance on Chicago Tonight before moving to special assignments, a look back at a revealing conversation with Barack Obama. But first, some more of today's top stories. The former assistant U.S. attorney who prosecuted Rod Blagojevich will be looking into allegations that a former Chicago Blackhawks coach sexually assaulted a player back in 2010 during the team's run to the Stanley Cup title. CEO Danny Wirtz reportedly announced the move in an internal memo that Reed Shar, now with the private law firm Jenner & Block, is conducting an independent review of the allegations. The move comes after 2 lawsuits have been filed against the team, one of which alleges that Bradley Aldrich sexually assaulted a player, but that the team did nothing after learning of the claim. Later in 2013, Aldrich was convicted in Michigan of 4th-degree criminal sexual conduct involving a student. And as lines at the state's driver's license facilities grow, so is the deadline. Drivers now have until the 1st of 2022 to renew all expired licenses. Same goes for expired identification cards. Waiting lines at DMV locations have become increasingly long, as has frustration for those waiting, in efforts to implement social distancing and limited capacity restrictions. The extension was included in a Senate bill Governor Pritzker signed late last week. A Chicago-based real estate investment trust reaches a multi-billion-dollar deal for more senior housing. Hundreds of new homes could be coming to North Lawndale through a city investment and a dispute over national landmark status for the Thompson Center. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane's Chicago business reporter Danny Ecker. Welcome back, as always, Danny. So Ventas, which specializes in healthcare real estate, reached a $2.3 billion deal with New York-based New Senior Investment Group. What is significant about this deal?
Well, it just raises Ventas's bet on senior housing. Like you said, it's one of the largest owners of senior housing properties in the country, so that's not surprising. But what's interesting is that, senior housing facilities were just hammered really early on and have continued to be during the pandemic. Owners of these facilities trying to fight off outbreaks, and there was just major financial and reputational damage done to owners of assisted living facilities and independent facilities, living facilities. And Ventas has basically said they're undeterred by all of it. And this is indicating that they are just as confident as ever in the future of senior housing. And it all has to do with aging baby boomers and what they believe is going to be a lot of new customers over the next decade. So they're just showing here that they're not backing down on their bet.
Now, Chicago is chipping in to build 250 new homes in North Lawndale. Now, how is this investment going to work, and why did Mayor Lightfoot select the West Side community area for this venture?
Sure. So it's basically meant to grease the skids to induce more housing development in a disinvested neighborhood. In this case, North Lawndale, which is really rife with vacant and decaying lots, which is one reason that Mayor Lightfoot prioritized this one. The city owns a lot of those lots, and obviously Mayor Lightfoot has been very public about prioritizing economic development in areas like this. And so the way this would work is the city would sell some of their own lots for $1 to a joint venture of community developers, basically, that would then build homes and ideally sell them with a bunch of subsidies, including TIF and other state subsidies to residents that would, have them and be able to build wealth in these neighborhoods. It's basically a residential component to Mayor Lightfoot's Invest Southwest initiative, which is all about commercial corridors.
And lastly, a state advisory board voted to nominate the Thompson Center to the National Register of Historic Places, but that butts heads with a couple of state agencies that oppose this nomination. What's going on there, Danny?
Yeah, well, so remember that the state right now is actively marketing the Thompson Center for sale. They're trying to just get it off its books, and for the top dollar that they can get, which may also include knocking it down and turning it into something, redeveloping the site with something different. So you had this advisory board. It's the Illinois Historic Sites Advisory Council, which is basically an independent commission to help point out properties that they ought to be considered for historic landmarking. And they said, hey, we want this to be a landmark. We want it to be eligible for tax credit so a developer can, maintain the building and turn it into something new, give it new life. But there's the state Historic Preservation Office and other agencies that are saying, we don't support that. We just want to get the highest bidder for this sale. So there's just a continuing battle, I guess, as the sale of the property goes here about whether it should be saved, whether it can be saved. And this is just part of the ongoing saga that's being written right now.
Yeah, should it stay or should it go? Danny Ecker, thanks as always.
Thanks.
And now we toss it back to Paris for more on City Council business. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. Earlier in the program, we discussed this weekend's violence, and now we're joined again by alderpeople Michelle Smith, James Kappelman, Jeanette Taylor, and Andre Vasquez. All right, it was a very eventful week last week, to say the least, with an aborted city council meeting devolving into some sort of chaos, and then Friday's makeup meeting where you passed the name change for Lakeshore Drive to DuSable Lakeshore Drive. Alderman Kappelman and Alderman Smith, you voted no on this name change. First to you, Alderman Kappelman. Why did you vote against it?
Well, I believe that DuSable deserves his due. I wanted to change the name to DuSable Lakeshore Drive. My concern is that when there was effort not to go that route, but instead use Jean-Baptiste Point du Pont Lakeshore Drive, many residents would just feel overwhelmed by it, and they would say, forget it, I'm just going to go with Lakeshore Drive, which misses the whole point. I think if we had called it DuSable Lakeshore Drive, it would really cement the point that we need to make, and that is it's time for all Chicago to recognize an African American who founded this city.
Alderwoman Taylor, Mayor Lightfoot commended the fact that there was a compromise here and it passed, but also said that this endless debate was kind of a distraction from other pressing issues. Alderwoman Taylor, was it a distraction from other issues like crime?
It was a distraction from reparations. How's that for a distraction?
Go ahead. Can you expound on that?
Sure. You have the Black Heroes Coalition who wanted to get the name changed. It's hilarious to me that the Black man who discovered Chicago, where he was struggling to name the drive after him. But I've guaranteed you, if we wanted to call this Trump Lane, it would have been done yesterday.
You say Trump Lane, okay.
Yeah.
Alderwoman Smith, you also voted against it. Practically, what is the impact of this name change going to be? I mean, are the signs going to read Jean-Baptiste Point DuSable Lakeshore Drive?
I suspect the signs may, but I suspect the real impact is going to be at on the news radio traffic report. It'll be DuSable Lakeshore Drive is backed up. That's the real practical, actual what happens when you change a name of a major street. and that has happened historically. So I think that's what actually is going to happen. But I have to say, we spent many months debating renaming a road, and I don't think we would have ever named it over a guy under Donald Trump. And really, I'm committed to supporting investment, jobs, and safety in parts of our city that have been historically disinvested. And I trust that we're going to put this behind us and get to the hard work that is really required. And with that, I agree with Alderman Taylor. We really do have to make substantive changes to address all the disinvestment that occurred by the people who came before us.
All right, Alderman.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Alderman Smith. Go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say, toward that end, we've convened a racial equity task force in my ward to try to see what role that we can play in the ward in order to make a substantive difference in events going on in the rest of the city.
All right.
And we're very committed to that.
Alderman Vasquez, on Wednesday, that city council meeting that abruptly ended, you co-signed a letter with some of your colleagues about the mayor and whether or not she's following the rules of order here or whether she's making them up as she goes along. Is she following the rules of decorum and of order in conducting these city council meetings?
I think if you look at Robert's rules of order, there are times where she is following and times where she's ignoring it and exerting privilege. Also, the way the laws are written in the municipal code, it kind of gives her the advantage. So I think if you want to have real democratic conversations, it needs to be a fair playing field, and that's why the council needs a parliamentarian. Also, just super quick, yeah, I think the name change was a distraction, so we didn't have to argue about it for 2 years. We could have got it done 2 years ago.
All right, and Alderman Taylor, Alderwoman Taylor, part of what happened in that meeting Wednesday was this now well-publicized argument between you and Mayor Lightfoot. Can you just tell us what was exchanged in that discussion?
So basically, we deferred and published, myself and Alderman Lopez, an assignment to the Corporation Council. And we know Corporation Council is supposed to protect and work for the citizens. And too often it sides with the mayor. And so the person that she wanted to appoint, I didn't personally have a problem with, but I had a problem with the way they're treating Anjanette Young. And Anjanette Young is the Black social worker who stood naked for over 20 minutes while the police raided the wrong house. And so it was to bring attention to that. And so she pointed to me to walk to the back. And I thought she was just going to say, hey, can you pull this? Can we do this? Can we talk about it? And she walked up to me and she started to scream and point her finger at me. And I asked her to lower her voice and to get her fingers out of my face. I'm a grown woman. I am not a child. And so she put her hand down. She continued to scream at me. And I explained to her, I'm a grown woman. I'm not a child. We are coworkers. You are not my boss. And at the end of the day, this city won't move without me, you, and the citizens being able to work together. And so I did something that I'm allowed to do as an elected official. And so to be screamed at like a child, I was not going to have. And this, of course, under no circumstances. This is not a person I don't check on. This is not a person I don't text. This is not a person I don't embrace in public. And so I was thrown off, honestly. And was shocked that this happened.
This follows the appointment or the proposed appointment of Celia Mays as a new corporation counsel, who was then eventually appointed or affirmed on Friday. Alderman Kappelman, I mean, reporters like to throw around the phrase council wars. Is this the beginning of council wars? Do you see the mayor as having a majority of supporters on city council to be able to move tough legislation forward at this point?
I think what we're experiencing in city council right now is healthy in the disagreement. We should not all be rubber stamping each other or our mayor. But I would like to see a little bit more decorum. That's something I believe strongly in, and I think
from the mayor or from your colleagues on the council?
Say that again.
From the mayor or from your colleagues on the council?
Well, I'm not. Oh, my belief is I'm not going to call anyone out, and I won't do that. I never have. It really goes against my spiritual beliefs. But I do believe what Carrie Austin said in City Council. She's asking all of us, every single person on that floor. We need to have a proper decorum. We need to be working with one another. We need civility, and I think part of what's going on is with this pandemic, it's done a number on us emotionally, and we're not coping well. But this whole world is not coping well, and you're seeing what the rest of the world's going through. So we need that reminder.
So
very
Paris,
quickly,
let me
Alderwoman
add on
Smith.
to this.
We're almost out of time, but quickly.
Yeah, let me add on to this, that I do think that that a mistake is being made in City Council, and that is letting Ed Burke be the guiding hand on how City Council should operate and giving advice on legal processes. This stuff that was happening in City Council is entirely reminiscent of the attacks on Mayor Washington. And Ed was one of the leaders.
You're talking Ed Burke had signed that.
Very
Alderman Vasquez, quickly,
to
please.
rely on him.
Yes, respectfully, I would not make the connection to the Council of Wars because we're not the Verdoliaks, and Mayor Lightfoot is no Harold Washington.
All right, yeah, and you're referencing Ed Burke, who was complaining about the mayor allegedly not following the rules. Ed Burke, who has been a stickler for those City Council rules for 50 some odd years. All right, our thanks to alderpeople Michelle Smith, James Kappelman, Jeanette Taylor, and Andre Vasquez. Thank you so much. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. A series of bills designed to address period poverty are headed for the governor's desk after passing in the General Assembly last month. The term period poverty refers to a person's inability to afford menstrual products when they need them. Tonight, as part of our First-Hand Living in Poverty series, we take a look at period poverty's impact in Illinois. Joining us are Ida Melby, founder and executive director of the Period Collective, and State Representative Barbara Hernandez, whose Western Suburban District includes Aurora. Welcome to both of you to Chicago tonight. Ida, let's start with you, please. The Period Collective works to make menstrual products available, more accessible to low-income people in the Chicago area. First, what is period poverty and who's most impacted by it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's being unable to afford safe, hygienic menstrual products. And in the definition, we also like to include being unable to manage your period with dignity or lacking adequate knowledge or education of menstruation. And it affects people, around the globe, and we think of it usually as a global South issue, but it's something that is happening right here in our own neighborhoods and in our own district. So in Illinois, we see that about 64% of women struggle to afford these products in the last year, and 1 in 4 teens in the U.S. has missed school because they didn't have the products that they needed.
Those are surprising numbers. Now, according to the Alliance for Period Supplies, as you just said, 1 in 4 teens have missed school because they lacked access to the needed supplies, and 1 in 5 low-income women have missed work, school, or similar commitments due to that same issue. Representative Hernandez, when did you realize that period poverty was an issue that some Illinoisans face?
Honestly, it was just a few years ago, only maybe 2 years ago, and it took a trip to a local food pantry to realize that there were women out there that did not have these products or were reusing these products that were only supposed to use once. So it's really crucial. As we know, it could be a public health issue as well. So this is why it's really important to make sure we end period poverty here in the state, and hopefully we can reach out to more communities and other states can follow the same path as Illinois.
Now, Ida, could you tell us a little bit more about the work that the Period Collective does to address period poverty?
Yes, we have partnered with about 50 organizations in the greater Chicago area to distribute period products. And there are organizations that work directly with the clients that we're trying to reach. So homeless shelters, transitional housing facilities, food banks, job networks, schools, after-school clubs, really any type of organization that reaches these individuals directly. And in the last year, we've also done a lot more distribution events where some of our partners or even district representatives have organized a food drive where they're distributing food, where we can kind of piggyback and also distribute these items.
Now, Representative Hernandez, a series of bills to address period poverty passed in both chambers in May. This includes bills that would increase access to menstrual products in public schools for grades 4 through 12, public colleges and universities, and homeless shelters. Representative, a bill making it possible for recipients of SNAP and other programs to use those benefits on menstrual products also passed in both chambers. You filed 2 of those bills. What were they?
I did. So I passed the HB 155, which is the SNAP and WIC one, to include the products in those items. But at the same time, HB 156, that would include the menstrual hygiene products in all bathrooms from 4th to 12th grade. And those are the biggest ones that I think are really going to impact our young menstruators in the state of Illinois.
Ida, what impact do you think these bills will have on the issue in Illinois? How can they help people?
I think they're gonna really make a big difference to these individuals that don't have access to the product that they need. Being able to buy them with the SNAP benefits is gonna make them able to, avoid these choices that they often are now, where they have to choose between buying food for their families or buying products to take care of their periods. And individuals that live in poverty, these kids that are missing school, if they can go to school and have access to these products in every bathroom, it's a huge burden off their shoulders. And we know that when kids don't go to school and they fall behind, that can really impact them, way into their life. And so it's important that we provide these products and it can really help them get ahead.
Representative Hernandez, does this legislation completely address the issue, or is there more that you'd like to see done?
I'm hoping that in the future we can talk a little bit more of maybe including small businesses as well and other areas and expand this legislation. Today is just the beginning of what we hope to close the gaps in period poverty in the state of Illinois.
And Representative Hernandez, when you were, working on this legislation in Springfield, what kind of criticism or resistance was there?
There was a few, especially when it came to the one in schools and making sure all individuals can get it, including transgender individuals. And so the items will be in the men's bathrooms as well. Okay. So of course I got a lot of pushback from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Because they didn't feel that this was, according to them, right.
And Ida, before I let you both go, what impact does period poverty have on, the mental well-being of people who are facing it?
It's really tough. There's a lot of shame associated with not being able to provide something so basic for yourself, to maybe not be able to provide it for your teenagers and see that they're not able to fully participate in their lives because they don't have the product they need. So it's tough.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Ida Melby and State Representative Barbara Hernandez for joining us. And we're back with more right after this.
Don't ever miss Chicago Tonight. Subscribe to our podcast. Get a daily download of our show delivered to your desktop or mobile device. Go to WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight podcast and subscribe.
If you've been watching over the past couple of weeks, you know that tomorrow, Phil Ponce makes his last regular appearance on Chicago Tonight. Starting next month, Phil will move to special assignment status, appearing as a guest host and on special news programs, among other duties. And we've been sharing some of our favorite Ponce moments. Tonight, his conversation with then Senator Barack Obama about his first 100 days on the job and his future job prospects.
Speaking of the presidency, I'm looking at a clip from something called sportsbook.com. I don't know if you heard about that, but they list your odds of being the next president as 30-1, which puts you ahead of Florida Governor Jeb Bush. His odds are listed at 35-1 , but you're behind Hillary Clinton at 6-1.
Well, that's pretty good considering I've ruled it out.
Oh, yeah, well, so is Governor Bush, and Condoleezza Rice comes in at 15-1. How tiresome does that speculation get for you?
I mean, it's fun for people who like to
place bets,
who like to place bets, or who see politics as a sport. But I've been very clear. I was clear from the first day that this bizarre question came up. I think the day after I was elected. So you're running 08? Look, I'm here to be the United States Senator from the state of Illinois. I have no plans and intentions of running for higher office in 2008.
You know, your book has been on the New York Times bestseller list, nonfiction paperback, for how long now?
34 weeks, yeah.
Does that come as a surprise to you?
It does. I have to say that when I first wrote this book, I think it was on the bargain table pretty quick. We didn't set any.
Yeah, you used to say you had boxes of it in your closet.
Absolutely. I think some of it was the exposure I received during the keynote address, and that seemed to strike a chord with people. But I am surprised that it has stayed on the list. It surprised my publisher. I was talking to my publisher the other day, and she was talking about the fact that we hadn't done any promotions of this book at all. I mean, it's been on the bestseller list sort of without much support. And she said, yeah, we should try to think about how we can tap into this bizarre interest in you. I said, well, that's encouraging. Bizarre. She said, well, I didn't mean it that way, but between her and my wife, I think both of them are puzzled as to why I'm getting all this attention.
And I think that senator went on to do a few things since that interview. That is Phil Ponce and Barack Obama back in 2005. And be sure to join us tomorrow night for a look back at Phil Ponce's career and a revealing one-on-one with the man himself. And that is our show for this Monday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Now, as we just mentioned, it is Phil Ponce's last day of regular appearances on Chicago Tonight. He gives his last interview before moving on to special assignments, and it's a one-on-one with Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
Plus, we visit with renowned sculptor Richard Hunt, who's made a new monument for Ida B. Wells in Bronzeville. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.